Chesapeake Bay, Atlantic, Appalachia, home in my heart, always.
Hello everyone and welcome to Down Home Virginia. I'm Sherry McKinney.
And I'm Norm Hyde. Coming up this month on Down Home Virginia. As the local foods movement continues to mature, some Virginia producers are on the cutting edge.
And Farm Bureau members will be working for positive change during the 2010 Virginia General Assembly.
And if you've never tasted cornbread like this, we visit an award-winning grain mill on Virginia's Eastern Shore. Welcome back to Down Home Virginia, everyone. Sherry, this month we're coming to everyone from the historic part of the Virginia state capitol where lawmakers meet every winter.
That's right, Norman. We'll have plenty of political stories for you coming up a little later on. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about the local foods movement. In fact, it's been wonderful through the years being able to taste all these wonderful local products. But more interesting is seeing how this market has actually matured.
Yes, and now some producers are taking the next step into creating their own local food delivery systems. The idea sounds simple. If local foods are so popular, why not build business networks that help farmers combine their production and sell to larger groups, not just individuals? But like any food distribution system, there are a million details to be worked out, and buyers have to be convinced that local food producers can deliver regularly. Spencer Neal with the Virginia Farm Bureau says local food systems won't replace our nation's food network, but they do offer great opportunities for niche producers.
There's a big demand from consumers to know more and more about where their food comes from. So it's a way to tap into that demand and keep a lot of the product and the processing and the marketing really within a community.
Deanna Child, owner of FarmerGirls.net in Fauquier County, is working to build and maintain just such a network. Her particular commodity is fresh pasture-raised meats. But she works with other local food producers in her area to combine food deliveries to both restaurants and subscribers.
It's actually pretty efficient. The farmers only deliver what they've sold. And so they're not harvesting, guessing what they may sell. They harvest exactly what they've sold, and that's what they deliver.
FarmerGirls.net has been in business more than a year after Child said she realized she and other local food producers simply couldn't afford to spend all their time talking to restaurant chefs and at farmers markets. Best of all, her system and others like them give producers instant feedback on what their customers want. Gary Madison spoke at a panel discussion on local food networks at the Virginia Farm Bureau convention last November. He says the whole local foods movement is a great opportunity for young farmers, and the industry's seeing more of them all the time near urban areas.
It's drawing new entrants into farming, as well as allowing folks who are the son that goes away to college or daughter that goes away to college comes back to the farm. There may not be enough net profit on that farm if it's a commodity-based farm, but adding a retail component, adding something that is a different marketing channel, maybe selling the exact same product but through a different channel, allows enough net profit for that next generation to come back to the farm.
In addition to local food cooperatives, there are also efforts to build partnerships between institutional buyers and local food producers. And one organic food cooperative in Southwest Virginia has grown to the point it sells directly to major grocery chains. But finding enough growers to commit to supplying local foods and convincing large buyers to use them is still a challenge, especially with competition from lower-priced vendors. Neal says the Virginia Food System Council is working on solving some of these challenges.
Still sort of a nascent industry when you get beyond sort of the individual selling to the individual, you know, as you begin to get sort of cooperative efforts. So there's still some time left before it's really integrated within our food system.
Child says she knows the industry is changing rapidly because almost every day she hears of another local food network effort beginning.
I think it's great because it's really a challenge to be a very small farmer. And the more of them there are, the more they can share ideas and help each other out and come up with better efficiencies on a small scale. The more outlets there are for them to sell their products and the easier they can access those, the more likely they are to farm.
And the good news for consumers, whether they come straight from the farm or through a cooperative or even a grocery store, it looks like the local foods movement is here to stay. Located close to the major population center of Washington, D.C., Fauquier County residents have made it a point of retaining the rural character of their community. In 2007, there were 1,222 farms in Fauquier County, with the most valuable crop being hay for the large number of cattle operations. As of 2010, there were 43,800 head of cattle and calves in the county. That makes it the 10th largest cattle locality in Virginia. Other commodities include small vegetable and fruit farms and orchards, corn, soybeans, and wine grapes. There are even 1,600 head of sheep in Fauquier County, Virginia.
As Congress gets to work, Virginia farmers continue to press for more reasonable Chesapeake Bay legislation. Since 2009, Virginia Farm Bureau Federation began voicing concerns about the Chesapeake Clean Water and Ecosystem Restoration Act of 2010, which is also known as Senate Bill 1816. Virginia farmers warned the approach taken in that legislation would pile billions of dollars in additional expenses on farmers and on local governments.
There's been a lot said about what it's going to cost municipalities, what it's going to cost watermen. But on the farmer side of the equation, we're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 to $3 billion just to implement the 5 best management practices that have been identified. Fencing alone, fencing cattle of streams, the icon of the Chesapeake Bay program, it's going to cost $800 million. Probably somewhere around $30,000 to $40,000 a piece for every cattle farmer in the watershed.
Stoneman said that Virginia has put more than $80 million in the state agricultural best management practice cost share program since 2006. Farmers have matched that amount with 60 cents to every dollar. A new report that compares the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's computer model of the Chesapeake Bay cleanup efforts with conservation records from the U.S. Department of Agriculture has found numerous inconsistencies, calling into question the entire EPA nutrition diet proposal for the Bay watershed. Farm Bureau will be working in the next Congress to promote a House bill co-sponsored by Pennsylvania Representative Tim Holden and Virginia Representative Bob Goodlatte. It includes a timetable for further reducing farm runoff, but offers more voluntary incentives and calls for more accurate estimates of cleanup efforts.
With the Virginia General Assembly also beginning this month, Virginia Farm Bureau has some other legislative priorities. Topping their list is reforming the state's eminent domain laws. 5 years ago, the General Assembly passed tighter restrictions on the ability of governments and utility companies to condemn land for the public interest. But Trey Davis with the Virginia Farm Bureau says they hope to better protect property rights with a state constitutional amendment.
Anything that comes through the General Assembly and takes the form of a statute, it's part of Virginia's code, it's part of our law. However, it only will go so far until it is challenged by a court. Having it in Virginia's Constitution prevents such easy overturn of that law by a higher court.
Davis admits it's a difficult task to amend the Virginia state constitution. It takes several years and approval by 2 subsequent versions of the General Assembly. The Farm Bureau will also be asking for budget amendments to support agricultural programs like Virginia Cooperative Extension, which has lost a lot of state funding in recent years. The Farm Bureau will press lawmakers to make sure any animal welfare laws are based on sound science, not emotions. And they'll be asking for more cost-share funding for voluntary environmental efforts to help clean up the Chesapeake Bay. Up next, Chef Maxwell has a delicious recipe for potato and apple chowder, just right for a cold winter day.
I'm Mark Viette. Coming up on In the Garden, I'm going to give you some great ideas on how to attract and keep birds in the garden during the winter. Stay with us.
Make your New Year's resolution to sign up now for your local community-supported agriculture co-ops. These CSAs support local farmers while you receive delicious, nutritious, fresh produce all season long. CSA members pay an upfront subscription fee to farmers in return for a share of the season's harvest, which is usually provided weekly. For your convenience, many CSAs deliver to central locations for pickup closer to subscribers' home or work on a certain day of the week. It may seem early, but CSA memberships typically fill up quickly. Each operation is different. There are many different CSA programs throughout the state. To find one near you, go to virginiagrown.com.
I grew this apple on my family farm.
I harvested this apple with my own 2 hands. I transported this apple to market.
I purchased this apple for my store.
I bought this apple for my family. And I protected this apple, the farm it grew on, and everyone who touched it by joining Save Our Food.
Help Virginia Farm Bureau protect farms and families by joining Save Our Food. Sign up today at saveourfood.org.
I love this apple.
Hi, and welcome to Chef Maxwell's Kitchen. We're here in Norfolk, Virginia at the Culinary Institute of Virginia, where the next great generation of chefs is being trained. We've got some wonderful Virginia food to play with today. We got potatoes, we got apples, and we got bacon, and we're going to make a really wonderful potato and apple soup. It's a great thing. All right, we've rendered the bacon down here. And I don't know whether you can see this or not, but we can see that the bacon is very crispy. All right, now we could pull this bacon out. In fact, I think the recipe that's going to show up is going to tell you to pull the bacon out. And that's best. That way you can put the bacon back in for nice and crispy. But I'm just going to go straight in here with some leeks. All right. Cook these leeks down. All right. You can hear them singing at us. And then I'm going to throw some apples in there. We got one apple diced already, and I'm going to trim the other one up. Get rid of the core. Now, the best way to do these apples is to cut straight down, turn it over, cut straight down, and now when I cut it, I got a nice dice coming up. Stir them around, just get them to start soft. Yeah. What I want to do is just kind of soften up the apples a little bit. I don't really want them to cook, and I'm going to mix these bacon right on into them. All right, let that go. I'm going to add a little bit of chicken stock here. All right. Stir that around, bring it up to a boil. All right, now we're going to be ready for a stick of cinnamon. All right. Let that simmer a bit. All right. Now, the potatoes. I boiled these potatoes ahead of time. Right? And you don't have to. If you're not going to boil your potatoes ahead of time, put them in when you put in the apples. And I'm going to go ahead and dice up the potatoes. It's easier to cook the potatoes ahead of time, and you don't lose any real flavor that way. So I've got apples and bacon and potatoes. What's not to like? We even got fat. Right? This is really good. We're going to get this hot all the way through. Right? Take a minute or so. And I'm going to add some apple brandy. Right? I'm going to add a little bit of this. All right. So we'll let that simmer just for a minute. All right. Now, I'm going to add some heavy cream. And I'm going to add some parsley. And stir this around. And you can taste it for seasoning and see if it needs a little salt and some pepper. I'm fairly comfortable with that bacon in there that I'm not going to need any salt. So we're going to bring this back up to a boil, and then we're going to put it into a bowl and have a good time with it. So we'll be right back. Now I'm going to dice up some apples while that soup is cooking, right? And then saute them in some butter, right, as a top garnish for the soup. So this is roll around here, and in goes the apples. Now we're going to stir this around. Now the butter will help brown these off just a little bit. That's called caramelized. It's the sugars that are actually turning brown. So they get sweeter and sweeter. All right, well, we brought this back up to a boil. Because we're using heavy cream, we can boil it. If we were using milk, we wouldn't be able to bring it to a boil. We'd have to bring it to a simmer because the milk would separate. But heavy cream's got enough fat to be emulsified. And now we're going to come back and start putting this soup together. Making sure we got some of all the ingredients in it. And you see the colors beginning to develop here. That means the apples are done and starting to caramelize. And we're just going to put some right in the center on the top of that soup. And there we go. Potato and apple chowder with a little bit of parsley and sauteed apples as a garnish. Great for the cold weather, great for the holidays, and once again, we've had a chance to play with some wonderful Virginia food, and we'll do it again next time when you come back to Chef Maxwell's kitchen. Remember, here at Chef Maxwell's, we always play with our food, but it's better if the food is safe, fresh, and locally grown. For more delicious recipes using Virginia-grown fruits and vegetables, contact Lisa Lloyd at the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services at 102 Governor Street, Richmond, Virginia, 23219.
Chef Maxwell's recipes are listed on the Save Our Food website at saveourfood.org.
We have found over the many years of feeding birds that multiple feeders really, it almost exponentially attracts more birds to the garden. And part of the reason is we have 3 different types of feeders here. Here we have a thistle feeder, and here we have a sunflower feeder with a few little peanuts, as you can see here. And then this might be a suet feeder, or we're sticking in some seed pods that the birds can feed on. You know, you really wouldn't think that having all of these feeders, you know, within a 4-foot by 4-foot area would really increase the birds, but it really does, because the birds really don't compete for the different types of seed. Sometimes this will be filled with goldfinches, sometimes this will be filled with cardinals. So don't be afraid to put multiple feeders in a very close proximity in the garden. Think about extending your garden away from the home. A lot of us have homes with just a basic foundation planting, but birds really want to have an area that they can fly to first, and then they'll come up real close to the house where you have all your feeders. And it's not hard to do. We just came out and created some of these flower beds behind me and planted a few shrubs and a few trees, and over a few periods of years, you'll see all what you see behind me, even including ornamental grasses. Now, the thing you're going to notice is I have not pruned my ornamental grasses. I haven't even pruned my seed pods of my plants. It costs us nothing to feed birds all winter long if you leave them in a garden. But if you go out in the garden in August, September, October, and you clean up your garden, you're going to have nothing for the birds. Just think of it as being hiking up in the mountains. You know, nature does not come through. Prune your shrubs, prune your trees, and rake the leaves. We leave it natural. And I've got the best tip coming right up. Winter is a great time of the year to thin out no more than 20% of your trees and shrubs. Just come in and take some of these branches that kind of grow inside, and I've got a great use for these to attract more birds to the garden. For many of us, we'll consider this a pile of brush, but look at it differently. Look at it as a bird habitat. So instead of taking all your prunings and shredding them or taking them to the road to be picked up and gotten rid of, you could actually use them in a garden to accomplish something very good for your birds. The birds love piles of branches. And you know, when I'm saying hundreds and hundreds of birds, I mean, that is reality. And a part of the reason is the birds, like the sparrows and the finches, really, and the juncos, like to be right around the ground or close to the ground. And they look for protection from hawks and cats, and they also need protection from the weather, maybe, you know, an ice storm or a snowstorm. So just take your prunings that you get in your garden and just lay them in piles that you see here. You can lay them right around your bird feeders, and you'll get more and more birds to your garden. I'm Mark Viette. Join me next time in the garden.
For more garden tips, use the internet to click on the In the Garden website. That's inthegardenradio.com.
Up next on Down Home Virginia, this small grain mill's making a big splash in the specialty foods market. Stay with us.
If you visit Mount Vernon, you are quick to learn that George Washington, our first president, was actually a farmer and a miller. In fact, there's a grist mill on his property there at Mount Vernon. And there's many ways to get a new twist on an old product. And one Eastern Shore miller found that out and is reaping the rewards. When Bill and Laurel Savage decided to turn their hobby into a business, they had no idea how successful it would turn out to be. The Accomack County farm family had always grown corn on their farm, but 1 year later, Bill decided to grow heirloom Indian corn to sell at market.
We went ahead and shelled it out for chicken feed, and I put some in my old 1930s John Deere Let's grinder and started grinding it up, and I smelled this really sweet aroma to it. And the texture was completely different, the color and everything. So right then and there, the light bulb went off. I said, well, I'm going to see what it would take to actually start a mill to revive this type of meal.
Today, that fluke grinding has led to Pungo Creek Mill's specialty Indian cornmeal. They sell the meal in 1 or 2 pound bags.
And we were selling primarily locally our first year. Now, this year, we decided we would take it one level further and try to go across the bay over to Richmond area and middle part of the state, and took it to the Virginia Food and Beverage Expo. And when we took it there, we came back with the Best New Food Product Award. The judges really liked it, and they thought it was something different as well. So that's when we knew we had something really totally unique.
But this year's product will be sold out quickly as the drought from the summer of 2010 turned costly.
We grew 16 acres of our Indian corn, and we lost it all to the drought. This drought, everybody tells me, was about a 100-year drought, and we were able to save seed out of it, and we've got a limited supply left of corn that we're continuing to grind and finish up. But we're going to have a dry spell on the Indian corn this year for our crop that we grow.
But if you're lucky enough to try Indian cornmeal, there's a recipe right on the back of the bag for traditional sweet Southern cornbread. It can also be used to make breakfast grits, cookies, and spoon bread, as well as sauce for crab casserole. The story behind the actual milling machine that started it all is even more interesting than the colorful cornmeal.
We were able to purchase a small, an 8-inch electric-driven stone mill, and I purchased this 1935 Meadows mill in December, and along with the bolter and the equipment that I needed there. So I'm trying to grow according to market. We've grown about 100% in size in a year's time.
The cornmeal is a Virginia Finest product, which means that it is endorsed through the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services trademark program for Virginia produced and processed foods. The cornmeal can be purchased from distributors listed on the farm's website at pungocreekmills.net and in a variety of locations on the Eastern Shore and in Virginia Beach and Williamsburg. And I got to tell you, this is a wonderful product, and it sold out very quickly last month at the Save Our Food Holiday Festival. And of course, Bill Savage is hoping for a better growing year next year.
That's great news, because I only got 1 piece of cornbread this time. And it's also, it should show us how grateful we should be for a great growing season when we do have them, because it's such a risky business.
It is.
And that's going to do it for this month on Down Home Virginia. Coming up next month, we're going to visit with the Governor of Virginia's executive chef to see how he uses local foods.
That's right. And of course, we're going to visit with Mark Viette, who's going to tell us a little bit more about how to use shade plants in your garden. So for everyone from the Virginia Farm Bureau, thanks for watching. Make it a wonderful new year.
Home will always be Virginia, between the Blue Ridge and Chesapeake Bay, and Atlantic to Appalachia. Home in my heart always, you know, make my home in Virginia.
I grew this apple on my family farm.
I harvested this apple with my own 2 hands. I transported this apple to market.
I purchased this apple for my store.
I bought this apple for my family. And I protected this apple, the farm it grew on, and everyone who touched it by joining Save Our Food.
Help Virginia Farm Bureau protect farms and families by joining Save Our Food. Sign up today at saveourfood.org.
I love this apple.